What's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of the Meaning of Podcast. I am Ace.
This is RB3.
And this is the episode where we talk about all your favorite film directors. But this episode is going to be slightly different because we're going to be talking about Pixar movies. Everyone loves those Pixar movies. They make you cry. They make you feel all the emotions, pretty much every emotion there is.
Oh, yeah.
They even made a movie about that, a Pixar movie about that.
Right. They made a Pixar movie about how Pixar movies make you feel. Yeah. Essentially.
That's exactly true.
Right.
We're going to get into all those movies and talk about some of our favorites as well as some of your favorites because we're going to be reading your questions. However, before we do that, last week we talked about Zack Snyder, also known as our Lord and Savior Zack Snyder, as RB3 likes to call him.
Yeah, Zaddy.
Zaddy, yeah. And we want to read some of your comments talking about what you guys thought of the episode. First comment on YouTube is from Terry. Really great discussion about Zack Snyder's filmography, including his flaws and strength from a broad filmmaking perspective. I love Snyder a lot, but some of his films aren't perfect. I like that the discussion touches on the idea that he's an auteur filmmaker and one of the most influential modern directors who created a filmmaking language and techniques that are still being used by all sorts of filmmakers after 10 years. Plus, he's one of the few filmmakers working today who specifically makes films in order to portray the unique quality of cinematic storytelling in a way that only a film can do. Wow, this guy's passionate.
Yeah, he got a long...
comment.
Right.
Yeah, man. Snyder is definitely someone who, for some reason, gets a lot of negative attention, but he really is a talented guy.
Yeah. I think you even see it in films like, even though Sucker Punch didn't necessarily work for me, it's something that was unique, something that was original, something fresh, did something new, and unlike most filmmakers, he's putting females in the forefront of his, of an action movie.
He gets a little bit of criticism as far as the portrayal of female characters. I know that for sure.
Right. I mean, there's that whole idea of male gaze, of how he kind of frames his women and like how and all that stuff. I know there's a whole controversy with Justice League, how the costumes in that were different than the costumes in Wonder Woman. So
that's a whole different conversation. But yeah, he's definitely a guy who has a very distinctive perspective. Let's read another comment. Albert Rodriguez says, the reason Zack Snyder is so divisive is the movies he's making are beloved properties to a lot of people. And when he tinkers with the core of their beloved characters, you're going to touch nerves. Look at it this way. Imagine if it was announced tomorrow that Zack Snyder would be taking over the Star Wars franchise. People would lose their minds at the thought of slow-mo lightsaber battles. Or lose their minds in a good way.
Yeah.
As far as slow-mo lightsaber battles. But yeah, I get what he's saying as far as like people think that he doesn't know the core material that he's touching on.
And, that's something you could argue of Watchmen, as we talked about in the last episode with the violence. Man of Steel, his characterization of Superman, and, of course, Batman vs. Superman with its adaptation of the Frank Miller, The Dark Knight Returns. So, yeah, I mean, maybe he doesn't, but maybe it's his interpretation of the material, too, that maybe in one sense, I know somebody else argued this in the comments, like Watchmen, the comic book was a satire or a comment on comic books and superhero figures, but withholding the violence emphasizes the anti-violent message of it, whereas Snyder's movie shows the cartooniness in comic book movies and its comments on that stuff, so...
I guess. I mean,
there's a way to look at it.
Sure, that's a way of looking at it. I don't know. I feel like he, for the most part, wants to accomplish... I think he mainly goes for the visual, nostalgic feel. Like, I remember that frame from Watchmen, or I remember this part in 300 graphic novel, right? That he wants to get that visually more than necessarily story beat wise, if you get what I'm saying.
Right, he's building up for big visual moments.
Exactly.
And everything in between is kind of setting up for that.
Exactly, where it's like, oh, remember when this happened in in the Dark Knight Returns comic? Like, look, it's just happening right now. Like the scene where Superman gets hit by the nuke and he's all sucked and dry and in the sun. Like, that's out of the comic, right?
Yeah.
So when I saw that, I was like, oh, that's from the Dark Knight Returns comic book. And he's mainly setting up for those visual nostalgic moments to make you feel something versus the story beat moments to make you feel something.
And and to be fair, a lot of the great filmmakers do have these moments built into their films
Sure.
and are building up to that. I mean, really, that's really what The Godfather is all about. If you take that movie, it really is a large collection of big moments, but everything in between is really intricate and well done. So that's why the moments feel natural, feel real, and maybe that's where Zack Snyder kind of falls apart. But I mean, that being said, I think it's cool that we have a filmmaker who is so expressive visually,
Sure,
and is so willing to put like the balls to the walls in terms of like slow mo, quick zooms, all that kind of stuff. It's interesting to me.
yeah. Absolutely. One more comment. Oliver Clutterbrook says, "Great topics, quality in-depth conversation every week. Fast becoming my favorite show. I hope you guys continue this episode's topic next week by discussing your thoughts on Justice League. Do you think they managed to succeed and make a solid movie after so much turmoil throughout the production?" Funny you mentioned that, Oliver, because we are about to dive into Justice League. I'm pretty sure you guys have seen it. If you haven't seen it, then maybe fast forward like 10 minutes. I'm sure it's not going to take more than that.
Spoiler alert! Spoiler alert!
But we definitely want to touch on Justice League a little bit just because we did do a Zack Snyder episode, and that's kind of the whole point why we did it. And also because it didn't make that much money over the weekend.
Yeah, well, it made a lot of money. Let's be fair.
Sure, but not for the
like,
property it was going for, not
Yeah.
for the amount of money they spent. Before I get into it, because I've made my thoughts very well known, I want to hear your thoughts, like your uncensored thoughts, not your tweet thoughts or your short thoughts, but your very broad and specific thoughts. RB3.
I thought it was okay, man. I was like, this shit was all right. Like, it wasn't like that bad, but it was really flawed. Really, it's probably the worst superhero movie we've seen all year. It's probably one of the worst superhero movies we've seen in recent years, maybe. But I mean,
if you say that though, you can't just say it was okay.
But it's not.
Because okay is like okay.
It's not Suicide Squad.
Okay is a 6 out of 10 or a 7 out of 10.
It's like 4 or 5ish.
Then that's not good.
But it's I could watch it. It's not
unwatchable.
It's unoffensively bad. That's what it is. Like Batman v Superman to me was bad, but it was bad because they're doing something ambitious and totally missed the ball on it.
Sure.
This movie is bad, but it's like there's nothing that really nothing that's really so inconsequential.
Sure.
That it's everybody's pretty surface level in this movie. It's pretty one note, pretty one tone. Not one tone. It's a lot of different tones. I think that's the biggest problem with it. But it's pretty one note in terms of like it's not really saying anything.
Sure.
It's not adding anything new to the mythos or anything like that. So it's like it's whatever.
Yeah, and I want to clarify right now, especially to people, because no matter what, even if we clarify, I shouldn't even clarify, but I'm still gonna do it just so we know and so people know. Is that we actually did an entire episode on Zack Snyder, and our thoughts are there. If you guys want to see that, go back and watch it, because we like Zack Snyder.
Yeah.
We made that very clear that we like Zack Snyder, and we love DC movies, and we love DC characters. I love DC characters. I said in my tweet before I even touch on this movie, I want to clarify that I love these characters way more than the Marvel characters. The only Marvel character that I love, like probably as much as I love the DC characters, is Spider-Man. But besides that, like Iron Man, Thor, and Cole, they're great. I love them, but I grew up with DC characters. That being said, this movie's a mess.
Yeah.
This movie, I was so disappointed because I went in really enthusiastic and I came out so disappointed because it really feels like Zack Snyder made a movie and tragic situations happen. They brought in Joss Whedon. They wanted to lighten up the film, and it almost felt like Stashgate, right? The Superman thing with Stashgate. The reason why that happened was because of the reshoots. Dude, that's like in almost every scene that he's in. That means that the reshoots were pretty freaking extensive, and that they really did take pretty much the entire movie. Joss Whedon kind of just stamped his vision onto this movie, and it really didn't work. I'd much rather have seen a full Zack Snyder movie, one that it was clearly all his vision, all his tone, all his characterizations that he made previously in all the other DC movies, because guess what? He made the DC universe with his wife, Deborah Snyder. They're the ones who created this. They're the ones who casted Gal Gadot as Wonder Woman. So I'd rather see his full vision And this movie did not bring me that. It brought me a mess of characters, moments that tried to be funny so hard, and none of the funny moments hit me. Barry Allen's funny moments didn't hit me. Aquaman's funny moments didn't hit me. Like, it really tried so hard to be funny and different, and it was a poor imitation of Avengers.
Well, you know, I think it's funny. You could kind of split this movie into 3 different categories, like logistically wise, right? It's like the Zack Snyder moments, the clearly Zack Snyder moments that were reshot by Whedon, and just the Whedon moments, period. You know what I mean? And they're kind of sprinkled out like a lot throughout the film. And it's really noticeable when you can tell which is which, especially if you're like trained and knowing. If you are familiar with Zack Snyder's work and you're familiar with Joss's work, you could tell where that kind of stuff was happening. To me, it was most notable the opening slow motion title sequence. That's very Zack Snyder-y, very.
And that's actually a moment I like.
That's one of my favorite moments in the movie.
Yeah.
But then you also have moments that are like where, you know, Batman is confronting Aquaman, which was originally shot by Snyder, then got reshot completely. And now, and in that, you could see, like, it's kind of the Zack Snyder angles, you know, and all that stuff. Like, it was already set, but just the Whedon-y lightness and tone and fluffiness to it to kind of lighten up the tone. Because I'm sure, and we even see, like, in the earlier trailers, it was going for a little bit of a darker thing. Like,
Sure.
You know, the whole, to me, like, when I was watching the first trailer, when I came out in 2016 Comic-Con for Justice League, I thought the relationship between a Bruce Wayne and an Arthur Curry is something that's like 2 completely dark, brooding guys trying to convince each other to, you know, join this alliance. And I thought that was really, really fascinating. And then there's the clear Joss Whedon moments that are just like them hanging around in like a carrier or a room, just like talking and
just bantering.
Yeah, exactly. You know, like the whole
and that didn't work.
And there's the subplots with and I think Joss Whedon should stay the fuck away from Wonder Woman.
Yeah,
stay away from
That's
Wonder
what I keep
Woman.
Hearing.
Stop it. If you, I don't know if you read the original
haven't.
script that Whedon had wrote for Wonder Woman. It's horrible because he makes Steve Trevor the main character.
Yeah,
all he's fascinated in is the romance aspect of it, which is, and he's completely he's completely like immortalizing Wonder Woman. He wants to make it like a goofy romance, and we even see that here in Justice League with that whole romance angle they're going for with Batman. And
Batman, yeah.
It just
to be honest,
to me, it's like that's the worst part to me.
I'm so disappointed in WB because I feel like WB, it's not so much like everyone can come at me and be like, oh, but the Zack Snyder tragedy, and I know it was a tragedy, but my issue is not that. My issue is the fact that they were trying to imitate Marvel instead of doing their own thing. They were so concerned with the Batman v Superman reviews and how dark it was and how it didn't make as much money as they wanted and how a lot of people didn't like the movie. Well, guess what? That movie made way more than Justice League did, which was a poor imitation of trying to make DC movies like Marvel movies. Guess what? That doesn't work, and that wasn't the issue with DC movies to begin with. It was story issues. It wasn't tone issues. It wasn't color issues. Yep. Those were just petty fans who complained about Superman's not colorful and they're supposed to be more colorful. If you add jokes and add color, it'll be a great movie. No, it won't. It'll still be a bad movie if you don't make a good movie to begin with, and if you don't have a clear vision. And I feel like a lot of people who are saying this is Zack Snyder's vision. I'm sorry, but you guys are dreaming. This is not Zack Snyder wanted. He even disassociated himself with the movie. So that tells you what Zack Snyder thinks of this movie.
Well, there's that whole report that came out a little bit ago that they just said like the first cut of the movie was just unwatchable. So they're just literally taking chunks out of it that Snyder shot. We see even in the early trailers of like Cyborg flying into the sky and being able to use his powers. You know, we also see another shot in the trailer early on where Flash breaks the glass with his finger. That's not in the movie. And again, these all seem like moments that are part of the character setup for each character.
Sure.
And because we don't have that setup, everybody is just like so one note. The only character we really spend time with setup wise is Aquaman. And that's clear because he has the next movie coming up, so they need to push that as much as you can. But I mean, you know, it's weird having this whole dark versus. It's so I don't get the whole point of lightening up something. Fucking The Dark Knight and The Dark Knight Rises both made $1 billion. Dark Knight, dark is in the title. Are you kidding me? Like, this is people who don't care about.
But they think that it's this misconception, and I know that here I go again making statements, but it's a misconception that critics like Marvel movies more, and they like them more because they're funny. That's not correct. Critics like Marvel movies more because they're better done. I was talking to a friend of mine who at work, who obviously I work with cinephiles because I work in production, and he was talking to me about Thor Ragnarok, and he was like, guess what, man, I didn't like Thor Ragnarok because I do. And I was like, sure, dude, that's your opinion, that's totally cool. And he was like, yeah, but you know, I'm gonna watch Justice League and I'm optimistic and all that. And I'm like, that's fine, dude, but to be honest, man, after say what you will about comedy and Marvel, if it doesn't work for you, cool, that's totally fine. But guess what? I rewatched Civil War and I rewatched a few other Marvel films. Not even comedy, dude. Watch that movie with the sound off and watch Justice League with the sound off. I'm talking basic filmmaking techniques. I'm talking editing. I'm talking composition. I'm talking contrast. Yeah. I'm talking color grading. I'm talking freaking music transitions. I'm talking music beats. I'm talking insert shots. These are basic filmmaking techniques. And if you compare Thor Ragnarok or any basic Marvel movie or Civil War to what they did in Justice League, it's night and day. This movie looked like it was a student film. Like, the editing was awful. Suicide Squad's editing was awful.
Well, like, see, Batman v Superman, that was the main problem for me. It wasn't like
the same thing with Batman v Superman.
The story was a problem, but the biggest problem was just that it looked like it was edited like like you said, a student film. It was just randomly cut to black. Like,
this is editing, man. This is such a basic thing, and that's my thing. My thing is like this. Fine if the comedy doesn't hit for you with Marvel movies, but at least make a freaking competent movie with Justice League. It wasn't competent. It felt like DC suits made this movie, just like in Suicide Squad, just like in Batman versus Suicide. It just feels like anytime they're inverting a lot more money, they seem to take a bigger shit on the movie.
Well, to be fair, I think this is a better movie construction wise than BVS and Suicide Squad, and I
don't know. That's debatable to me. BVS, Suicide Squad, sure, but BVS. The thing everyone keeps asking me, what do you like better, Justice League or BVS? That's a tough question for me because BVS is like I feel like there's more good in BVS than in Justice League, but I feel like BVS has the biggest flaw in any film. Superhero film ever, which is called Jesse Eisenberg's Lex Luthor. So it's kind of the balance thing, right? Because I do like some things in Justice League. I liked Superman. I thought Stashgate was awful. I thought that CGI thing was terrible. But his character, I liked him. I thought he was cool. I like Superman. Wonder Woman's fine. She does what she needs to do. And there's a few scenes in there that I thought were kind of cool. But overall, the movie together as a story didn't work. And I feel like this is WB trying so hard to imitate rather than to be original and to create something that can challenge Marvel by making it different, not by making it a poor imitation of it.
Well, see, that's where I think like you were saying, like there's a lot of good in BVS. To me, BVS is more ideas that I love that they're trying to go for. Just the execution wasn't there. The execution was kind of there, but kind of not. Really? Just because there was like 4 directors, really. Like, sure. Honestly, there was like 6 producers and 4 directors, like all on the set the same day, kind of trying to put this together, which was fine. They're trying to, they had to fix the movie somehow.
Yeah.
But it was just like
big question now too is the box office weekend, right? Yeah. Right.
Well, first I just want to address one thing though.
Sure.
I think the biggest problem with this movie though, and I think this is a problem that no other critic is going to talk about, is the music. The music, to me, the Danny Elfman score, this is something that I think killed the movie for me. Every single beat along the way, except for the opening. But the opening song wasn't his score. But everything, it was like he was getting super wacky when the Wonder Woman opening scene when they were like breaking out, like like when she was like coming stopping the bank robbery or whatever. Yeah. The music was just super wacky. I like how they incorporated her theme, but the music was just wacky. They had to, of course, bring back the Batman animated series and the Tim Burton scores, and the same thing with John Williams with Superman. To me, you don't do that. That's the one thing you don't do. You shouldn't remind audiences of a better movie when they're watching something like Justice League, you know what I mean? And is so disrespectful to me as somebody who kind of, I'm not a musician, but I like listening to film music, and I try and help out and do that sometimes. But just to me, it's like, Hans Zimmer created an iconic score with the Dark Knight, yeah. And he created an iconic score with Man of Steel.
Absolutely.
But where were those at during the movie? And it's like you're completely dehumanizing what we've become familiar with so far in the series, especially with the Superman stuff. Like you like, I know you enjoyed the Superman stuff. I didn't, because it just felt like a total 180.
Sure,
like
I agree with that.
Yeah,
sure.
It was like they took our suggestion, make the All-Star Superman version of Superman, but the mythology that was building up to that point makes no sense to where, we should have seen an arc, we should have seen a journey.
Sure.
And I know they cut out the whole subplot of the evil Superman. They cut it down to like one scene, but that's something they could have explored. But to me, that's the biggest problem.
Sure.
Is the music is.
I want to finish with this. Right now, 96, 97 million is where it's at. It's probably going to be 97 actuals, probably, once we get the official results. But right now it's at 96 mil, which is exactly what Guardians of the Galaxy 1 made. A property that no one knows about. And Justice League, which is the greatest superhero group ever in the history of ever. So to say that's disappointing is putting it lightly. I mean, it didn't make as much as Wonder Woman. It didn't make not nearly as much as
Suicide Squad.
Suicide
How
Squad.
Did Suicide Squad open?
Suicide Squad made way
I know,
more.
133. This
133. But that's not even. It didn't even touch Suicide Squad.
Yeah.
It didn't even touch BVS. I'm talking Wonder Woman. I'm talking Guardians of the Galaxy 1. Like, that's 96 million to me. Reboot. I'm telling you right now, if Warner Brothers is inverting and putting so much effort and money into this movie, and they wanted at least 120 million, they wanted that. I know that from just reading up on what Warner Brothers executives wanted, and it makes 96 or 97, right? Because we don't have the actuals, but 96 is what we have now. That is not just disappointing. That is, take a step back, take like some retreat, and start firing executives and start rebranding, restructuring the DC universe. Keep what you like and erase everything else. That's my personal take on it. And I'd rather they do that because, again, I'm extremely passionate about DC characters and DC comics. And I want them to do them justice. And I want them to do a good version of these movies and a version that works. And everyone can blame Snyder and blame this and blame that and blame the CGI. I 100% blame Warner Brothers because they don't trust their directors to take a franchise where it needs to go. That's my last thought on it, and I'll let your last thought go.
I mean, the 96 million, that's disappointing, especially knowing that the budget reported 300 million. It's probably more than that, but that's just what they're,
that's insane.
That's what they're letting the trades in, and that's not even including the marketing, which is probably 150 worldwide market. I don't know what the international numbers are.
96 is that's to be honest, that's basically bombing. It's almost bombing.
Well, here's the thing. Most movies make about 30% of their money, of their total gross opening weekend. This movie, in order to break even, it will need to make at least 100 million worldwide. I don't know what the international numbers.
I think it already. I think they're kicking butt internationally. That's my personal take. I think they are. I know the numbers are out there, but
yeah, I'm not sure about the international numbers, but the domestic numbers. Look, if it takes 30, if you're making 30% of your money opening weekend, that's generous for a movie like Justice League with a low cinema score and a low, critic rating. It's awful. You make 30%, you make the rest of your 70% with that. You're making maybe
185 million international numbers. That's incredible.
130 international, so that's including domestic. That's including domestic.
No, I think that's
either way. It's not good.
That's just international.
Well, either international, you could pick up a lot of money, but there's less. The studios get less money international than they do domestic. Not a lot of people know that. Domestic, you get a lot more for,
and that's opening in all the markets too.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So no, it's not looking good, but I do think if this movie has some sort of crossover success, maybe through, I don't know, video games, or maybe they start incorporating the CW stuff. I don't know what they're gonna do to kind of course correct from this point. But I mean, I really do hope these movies do good. I'm a
I
fan
want
of
them to
these.
do good, yeah.
You know,
And I like Warner Brothers movies. They make good movies. I don't know what they're doing with this property though.
well, you know, it's tough too, man. You know, there's the whole thing of, you know, they tried early on to let Zack Snyder do what he does, and Man of Steel ended up not doing great in Batman v Superman. It was kind of like a middle ground between the studio and Snyder, and it did well, but it didn't do great critically or you know, fans wise with the fans. So then they see something like Suicide Squad, which is completely studio handled and all that stuff, recut, all that jazz, do really well. They're gonna do the same thing with Justice League, and this is what we get. You know, there just has to be a compromise. I mean, we talk about Marvel Studios a few weeks ago, and we're going to talk about Pixar today. But the real strength in those companies is collaboration. You know, the directors and the producers are all working on the same team, same page. There's a general understanding. And if a Marvel movie's not working, they're willing to push back the release date. They're willing to try and fix it, and they're willing to try and, you know, get it straightened out. Whereas something like Justice League, they were shooting that before Batman v Superman even came out. So in shooting a lot of that stuff, you know, they already had the plan laid out, but after the mediocre performance of BVS, they're just like, we have to scrap.
It's so funny.
Scrap everything and put it. You know.
I agree. Yeah, but you say mediocre performance.
Yeah.
166 mil, 96 mil. You imagine that?
Yeah, that's
I know you're talking about critically, but either way, regardless of the fact that BVS didn't do as well critically as they wanted it to do, 166 mil. I remember that number when it came out, and I was like, oh, that's pretty good, because a lot of people were expecting like 185 or something like that. But my thing was,
it was Batman and Superman. You put those two in the title.
Put those together, they wanted almost like a $200 million movie. It didn't do that, and that's why they were like, well, maybe it was because the critics and blah. It's so ironic. Isn't it ironic that time is always something that's going to change your perspective? Because guess what? Now, 96 mil. You imagine that? I mean, think about it. Justice League. I don't know. That to me is crazy, but yeah, that's just wild to me. I want these movies to do well, and I want to clarify that these are our opinions on the movie. These aren't necessarily have to be yours. A lot of people love this movie. A lot of people we know and work with love this movie. Ellis loved the movie. Joel really enjoyed the movie. Christian liked the movie. Like, Ellis loved it, though, which is crazy to me. But a lot of people really, really like this movie, and a lot of DC fans like the movie. Just because I'm a DC fan who didn't like the movie doesn't mean I'm the opinion that, you know, is the say-all, be-all, and I'm saying you guys suck. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying this is my perspective, and I'm saying no matter what you want to say. I saw a tweet earlier today that said, you know, retweet if you disagree with the critics and you love Justice League. Retweet now so that Warner Brothers knows that you love it. And I wanted to answer the tweet and say this: it doesn't matter. Numbers talk more than critics. And you could say whatever you want about this movie and how much you loved it. It doesn't matter, because this movie is based off money, not critics. So as much as you say the critics, it doesn't matter. The studio is looking at the numbers, the box office numbers. And if they don't see a number that they feel like the fans of these movies went regardless of the critics, then you're not, no matter how many retweets you get, it's all in vain, because studios and movies are always based off money.
Yeah.
And this movie didn't make enough money to warrant a continuation of this franchise, in my opinion.
Well,
so regardless of how good this movie is, if you think this movie was awesome and it deserves more, didn't make that much money. Same with Blade Runner 2049.
Well, that's
I thought that movie was awesome.
Yeah,
Blade Runner 2049 was a freaking awesome movie. Guess what? It didn't make money, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I know, exactly. I know. I was just going to bring up the Blade Runner example, because I know a lot of people were talking about, is Denis Villeneuve still going to do Dune, or should he do 007 because of Blade Runner flopping? And if it's like, you know, a lot of the problems with that movie and a lot of problems with Justice League comes down to the marketing, right? The trailers for those movies don't really tell you anything about them, especially with Justice League, where we get like 9 trailers and still have no idea what we're about to see when we go into the movie. You know? And especially when you have the initial trailers looking completely different than the final wave of trailers. And then also the whole Rotten Tomatoes thing kind of, affected that as
Absolutely
well.
affected.
And it's weird because, I thought, for me, I was defending Rotten Tomatoes for what they're doing. I thought it's their brand, their company. They should do whatever they want. If they want to wait until their show to put out the score. The problem with me is the fact that they didn't actually release. They had to show out for a day and then didn't release the score for like another 24 hours. Now that's problematic to me because if somebody wants to go Thursday night and they want to look at the reviews or look at the aggregate, they just kind of had to go in blindly, and that to me is cheating the fans, and that to me is, I don't know if WB
Warner Brothers interference.
But hey, listen, hey WB, hey, I'm applying for the internship. Hey, listen, I ain't talking shit. All right, I'm your guy.
I'm the one doing it.
I love you guys. Great movies. You guys, Argo.
I think they do great movies too, man. I thought Blade Runner 2049 was awesome. I actually thought King Arthur was kind of cool, but my thing is like, it doesn't matter what I think. It doesn't matter what you could say. Anything you want about opinion and critics and this and that, and it's your fault. It's that fault. At the end of the day, they're looking at the box office numbers, and it didn't make as much money. Let us know what you guys thought in the comments down below. Please be peaceful, civil, respectful. This is all opinion-based, and it's all movies, guys. This isn't freaking the end of the world, so let's chill out a little bit. And we're going to move on, unless you want to say anything else. Yeah, seriously. We're going to move on to Pixar movies, because Pixar is one of the most successful studios. This is like almost MCU successful. Not quite, I guess, because MCU makes more money. But for an animated studio, Pixar's been kicking butt ever since their first movie, which was obviously Toy Story. But it's crazy how Pixar is an animated studio who, I was thinking about this earlier, that they're able to connect not only with children audiences but adult audiences in a way that is almost unheard of in animation, right? I mean, I guess anime is the only other type of animation.
Miyazaki,
Japanese, Japanese anime is the only type of other animation I can think of that can hit adult audiences, quite like Pixar. But other than that, unless it's nostalgia, adult audiences don't really go out to see animated movies by themselves or like with a group of other adults. They usually go with a child, right? But Pixar, there's now like movements, and there's now like me who can hang out with their like 25, 26, 27-year-old friends and be like, hey guys, with a group of like 8 dudes, and be like, you guys ready to go see that new Pixar movie? You know what I'm saying? Like that doesn't really happen. And Pixar is able to find that kind of success with both types of audiences. I want to hear your thoughts on Pixar because you have a little bit more like background on them and stuff.
Right. No, I mean, to me, Pixar is one of my favorite studios ever. Like, not studios, I guess production companies.
Yeah, production studio. Like, you're more a production company now.
Right, right. And
they're under Disney. They're under the Disney umbrella.
Right. They got bought by Disney in 2006. Before that, they're pretty much like almost like independent, but with backing from different places. They of course, their origins are, they started off doing short animated shorts, but they also created this thing called the Pixar machine, which was a big revolution in visual effects because it was the machine that allowed like CGI computer effects to be printed on actual film reel. Mm-hmm. So then we see big productions like Jurassic Park using this technology, T2. A lot of the technology was innovated, by early on with like John Lasseter, Ed Munchin. I'm not exactly sure I pronounce the main CEO's last name, and Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs was one of the first founding members of Pixar.
That's right.
Who really backed them and financed them through years, and I'm talking years of debt, almost to the brink of shutting down at a lot of points. I'm familiar with this information because I read the book that Ed wrote, Creativity Inc., which is all about the business aspects of Pixar and stuff like that. And their story is so inspirational because what their main focus has always been as a company is collaboration, teamwork. They master that like no other. When they have, they have story groups, they kind of of course you have the animators doing their thing, but the story groups and the writers and the producers and the directors working on their own thing, the technology side of it. But it's all a team. It's all one big like powwow working together to achieve what they need to achieve. And to me, it's clear in films like Toy Story, A Bug's Life that come, and then of course a little later we see Monsters Inc., Finding Nemo. These are all films that in their development kind of were like the early bare bones of Pixar in terms of the development teams and what they had like resources wise. But once you start to see the budgets pick up, and once you start to see them introduce new names and figures and filmmakers like Brad Bird and Lee Unkrich, who was an animator who became an editor and eventually a director. Once they started cultivating their own talent within the company and within the brand, the creativity just expanded and exploded to another level to me. So
yeah, and it's one of those things. They were one of the first innovators as far as 3D animation.
Well, yeah,
right?
Yeah.
Because
Toy Story was the first fully
Toy
animated.
Story is the first fully 3D animated movie, and it's one of those. They're the ones who showed you the power of 3D animation and the ability that because obviously as an animated fan like I keep up with anime and keep up with animation and all that. It's so distinctive that you almost kind of want to brush it away first initially. But the fact that Toy Story succeeded so much, 3D animation became like, one and the same with Pixar, and became like easy to the eyes of people because they got with the story. That's kind of what made it, right? I mean,
Right.
What do you think of the way they're able to incorporate 3D style animation?
Right. Well, the technology with Toy Story is just a part of it, but like you said, it really comes down to the heart, to the characters, to the story. And originally with Toy Story, they wanted it to be a bunch of branded characters, but a lot of the major corporations didn't want their products connected with a specific personality, so they had to develop their own personalities with these characters like Woody, Buzz, Bo Peep, the Rex, the dinosaur, all of these different fun and interesting new ways. And the reason why they're toys is because it's something that kids are using now and adults have used in the past. So there's always going to be a connection transgenerationally with toys. So that's really why Toy Story succeeds. But on the technology front, when this movie came out and you read a lot of the initial reviews for it, people were mind blown by the 3D animation. You read Roger Ebert's review, and he did the television review with Caesar, and they
I remember those when they used to do that back in the day.
Yeah, the thumbs up. Yeah, so they had, and I went back and watched the one for Toy Story, and they were like, just look at the technology, look how the way they move, like, because that's unseen at the time. I mean, we're used to it now, but
Sure.
Back in 1995, Jurassic Park was the biggest technological jump we had overcome, and now seeing a full movie with all these different weird characters, and where they have at least some form of texture, some form of stuff, but again, they had to mine the story to the right place.
Sure.
And that's always the heart of what they've been able to do.
What Pixar is able to do.
Right, because they won Academy Awards in the past before Toy Story, with the shorts that they did.
Sure.
Like I forget the name of the other toy short that they did, but they did a lot of shorts, and they're winning Oscars.
Sure.
But even while they're winning Oscars, they were still an incredible amount of debt. And Steve Jobs would go into meetings and kind of trying to help bail them out. But Steve Jobs was also just an incredible businessman in general. So he would organize a lot of deals for them and help them stay up and whatnot. But it's just fascinating how, their most central concern has always been the way their movies are going to connect to people.
Exactly. That's my follow-up point to this is what makes Pixar stand out, obviously, is their characters, their ability to connect, their animation, their stories. That is essentially what makes it. But what I find so interesting is that through all that, essentially what connects them the most in this world that we live in, where Hollywood is making reboots and remakes and restructures and re-this and re-that, or adapting different franchises or different characters from books or comic books, Pixar pretty much, for the most part, makes all original stories, original characters, original everything. Originality is something that is a key term in pretty much all their movies, as far as like but like you said, making Buzz and making Woody actual recognizable properties and franchises based off good storytelling, right? Because at the end of the day, that's what makes a timeless character. That's what makes people want to be invested into buying products for different types of toys or stuff. That's what made Star Wars so good, is because at the end of the day, as cool as something isn't enough. You have to make a story that revolves around those characters and make it well. And that's why for me, I want to hear your thoughts a little bit on the originality of Pixar, because pretty much they make all these original movies, which is great, because even though they're animated, it allows people to invest money into an actual original story instead of another restructure or rebranding of another movie. And the fact that they're able to take these original stories and make them like so required viewing. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Right.
you got to see the new Pixar movie. What is it about? I don't know. It's about some girl who like loses her dad. It's like, well, we got to see it no matter what. Like, you don't care what it's about. You just want to see it because you know it's going to be good. Like,
Right.
regardless of it. Whereas like, if I said you got to see the new Pixar movie, what it's about? Well, it's about Batman's dad. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, taking a property that people know. Instead of doing that, Pixar takes original stories and characters you don't know and then just says, let us tell you this story and let us convince you that this original story can be just as effective as a nostalgic story.
Right, and the whole reasoning behind their originality is because they want to do something new, do something people haven't seen. Because once people get tired of the same conventions over and over again, the genre is just going to go stale. So of course they're going to innovate new ways to incorporate different, and they're really out of the box ideas. I mean, Ratatouille is a rat chef, you know. But what makes these wacky and crazy ideas succeed is that from the very beginning they have to establish what the movie is about. What are they trying to say? What is the message or what is the theme that they're going for? And that's what makes Pixar so brilliant, is that that's the clear objective throughout all the movies. And what makes it even more brilliant is that they never outright say it. That's their main rule at Pixar, is that their whole fundamentals of filmmaking is not 2 + 2 = 4. It's just asking what's 2 + 2. And then the audience has to dissect and kind of evaluate on their own terms what these individual movies are saying and what they're trying to say and how they're expressing that. To me, the biggest example of that is Finding Nemo. That's a movie that's about, that is essentially about fish, but what it really is, a bigger tale, is about a relationship between father and son. And it's also a large tale about disability as well. But I mean, we'll get into that when we start discussing each movie. But again, they have the heart of the story in from the very beginning. And no matter how many directorships or no matter how many different writers they go for, and that's their whole point of their story group. They have a big story group, like kind of like a writer's room, I'm assuming. But it's not like the writer's room where we hear in Hollywood, they're just getting this writer and this writer. No, it's a team. These are people who work together all the time, and they have a language and a way of communicating with each other, and a way of dialogue and discussion and group thinking that really helps develop each story. And that's kind of one of the beauties of animation too, is that you could have something storyboarded and storyboarding and like pre-animation, all that stuff. You could develop the look and the feel of the film, and with Pixar, they lay it all out and see if it's working just in that format before they even start animation.
Sure.
And make sure it's perfect on the script level before they go out of it. So that's
Yeah,
really...
it's incredible. It's incredible what they do. Let's start diving into some of their movies. Obviously, it all kicks off with Toy Story, which I remember clearly. I don't think you were even born, right?
No, I wasn't.
I remember clearly watching Toy Story for the first time. It might have been one of my first memories as far as like movie-wise goes, because I was very young when I saw this movie. I mean, it came out in 1995, which means I was 4. It's crazy. This movie, like I said, I remember when it was coming out, and I remember buying it on VHS. I remember rewatching it a million times. I was obsessed with this movie as a kid, right? Because I was the target audience. And I remember being obsessed with Buzz Lightyear and having the Buzz Lightyear toy. My brother had the Woody toy. And just the joy that this movie brought to me on a very, like, just on the audience type perspective and an audience level, and the creativity that this movie brought. and the little aliens, the pizza planet, everything that stays with you with this movie. The evil bully kid named Sid, I think his name was Sid.
Sid, yeah.
Andy with freaking every time that Woody yelled out Andy, or Buzz Lightyear realizing that he's a toy and realizing that he's just one of a lot of different toys.
And the soldiers and they're funny or hilarious.
The soldiers are funny.
Yeah.
Buzz realizing that he's trying to find himself, kind of thing.
Right,
Like
right.
what happens when you find out that you're just an object to be played with, right? That's
Right.
kind of jarring. And they actually go through that mental decay of Buzz Lightyear when he's going crazy.
Right.
And he's like, Buzz, snap out of it, Buzz. And Buzz is going insane. But this movie became like a freaking like classic, instant classic when it came out. And not just based on the animation, but based on the story and the characters and the type of innovation that they were incorporating. And obviously, Tom Hanks and freaking Tim Allen.
Tim Allen, yeah.
You're not going to get any better than that as far as chemistry, and as far as like voice performances, and as far as getting adults to kind of tune into the movie. Because guess what? In 1995, people loved Tom Hanks and Tim Allen. Obviously, they probably still love him now, but I'm saying, like, especially in that time period, that's a good way to get a dad or a mom in the movie theater, is with those voice casting. What do you think of this movie overall? Because this movie, obviously, like I said, has a super deep connection to me personally, because I remember watching this when I was a kid.
Well, yeah, I mean, I wasn't alive when this came out, but I know for a fact I had like Toy Story and Toy Story 2 on VHS when I was a kid, and I was watching those nonstop, and those are films that I still resonate with today. And then we're going to talk about actually watching, for me, my first Toy Story movie in theaters, Toy Story 3. I guess we're going to talk about that a little later. Or we can even bring it
Toy
up
Story
now.
3,
Or something
dang,
like that.
dude.
But that was a heartbreaking. But see, that's why. These are movies about childhood. These are movies about having those icons and having those images and the toys, like those are yours. You know what I mean? Like that's something you will always remember as a kid, and that's why we have such classic like iconography in that, with the little aliens, with the pizza planet, because as a kid those stand out. Like a pizza restaurant is gonna stand out to you. Your little toy soldiers are gonna stand out. Your Woody and your Buzz. And it's all about. It's for on a human level. It's about what happens when the new sheriff is in town. When there's a new new person coming into somebody's life, and how that affects somebody. Like how's Woody's relationship with Andy affected because of Buzz. And that's that's a deep theme. That's an adult concept. And that's something that most kids' films wouldn't address, but that's the main point here, and how that leads to jealousy and envy, and how that impacts their general relationship and their eventual camaraderie, because they're both realizing they're the same. And that's from the Woody's angle is his internal conflict throughout is the possibility of losing Andy to another toy. With Buzz, it's a different internal conflict in terms of like realizing his identity, discovering who he is, and why being exposed to who he is, being a toy, that affects him as well. So like it's very deep, and they have these clashing internal conflicts that ultimately come to a head in a really beautiful way. So I think that's why that movie succeeds so well.
Yeah, it's absolutely incredible how many themes they're able to hit inside this movie. And it's crazy because I remember some moments in the movie where I was like, yo, it's kind of hardcore. Like obviously Sid blowing up toys is like,
oh yeah,
that's one thing. And also the fact that Sid gets like freaking scarred for life when those toys come to life and basically threaten him. It's like, we're gonna kill you, bro. It's like Chucky. You're like, damn, Chucky is real and he's gonna kill me. Because that whole scene where he finds out that the toys come to life, and then he's trying to tell like, Mom, they came to life, and that kind of whole thing.
Right.
So those are obviously all themes that are incredible, and this kind of jump started Pixar's journey into success, mega success,
right.
And which followed up with The Bug's Life. And it's funny, A Bug's Life, so many people kind of like brush off this movie. This movie hit me so hard.
Really?
This movie's one of my favorites. I remember if I saw Toy Story dozens of times, I saw Bug's Life even more than that.
Really?
I would rewatch this movie so many times. It made me laugh so hard. I remember characters in the movie. I remember Hopper. I remember the freaking so many themes in the movie and so many characters and so many funny moments. And I was obsessed with this movie RB3 to a point that just even like thinking about it now, I'm like remembering all this nostalgic memory that I have with the movie because I thought it was hysterical. I thought it was super fun and actually has one of my favorite lines and almost any movie that I can think of, which is the freaking light in The Fly. And it's just this tiny little moment, but it makes me laugh so hard when the fly's flying towards the light. And he's like, don't fly towards the light. Don't look in the light. And he's like, but I can't help it. No, Roger, don't do it now. And he just blows up.
Yeah.
And I was just like, that's so freaking funny. Because it's that whole theme of like what goes inside the mind of a bug, right? Like, why do bugs fly into lights? Because they're dumb or something. And it's because it hypnotizes them in the movie. But just that little moment that's just, it's so funny to me. It just makes me laugh super hard. I remember having the toys. I had the roly-poly toys that used to like roll up and come back, and I remember having the Hopper toy. This movie to me was no joke one of my I remember having so many. I have loved this movie RB3, and I don't know what you think about it because a lot of people don't care for it. I want to hear your thoughts because I
haven't seen it in a long time, so I can't really say this.
Damn it, RB3.
This is the one I'm
moving on.
I'm actually not, I mean, I do remember liking this. It's it's Seven Samurai with bugs.
Yeah,
I think that's really funny, and I think they that's again they were trying to go for something new, something different. They didn't want to do. I mean, Toy Story 2 is their next film, but you know. Before that, they weren't interested in doing sequels. So for A Bug's Life, that was something that hit. That was, you know, something original, something that was going to hit. And it has some production problems behind the scenes, but ultimately came out really almost kind of ahead of its time in terms of what they're addressing in that movie. And it, you know, unfortunately came out around the same time as Ants, the DreamWorks, you know, Bugs movie. But the DreamWorks one was like a Woody Allen kind of animated film, which is weird. This one was very much Pixar-y.
Very kid friendly.
Yeah. So it's, you know, it came out in a weird time, I guess.
Sure.
And I think that affected it a lot. So
it's crazy how like this one too is like obviously Toy Story started it all with the products and the toys, but I remember seeing and buying and having physically in my hand RB3 so many toys based off this movie, having the Hopper toy, having the roly-polies, the other types of bugs in this movie. I just remember having those toys. Let's quickly go into Toy Story 2, which I remember again watching. Toy Story 2, I freaking love Toy Story 2. I remember as a kid loving it so much. I remember loving the freaking Star Wars reference in the movie with the whole "I am your father" thing with Zord. I think it's Zord. I'll probably get corrected,
Zord,
but I'm pretty sure Zord, and he's just like running away, and I'm just like, dude, that guy goes hard. I love Zord, and Zord like became one of my favorites just because he's related somehow. I thought he was related to Darth Vader or something. I was like, he's like Darth Vader, and I love Darth Vader. That must mean I love Zord. Like as a kid, that's my thought process, and I remember Zord. I remember the freaking like Barbie scene in that movie, and me being like, yeah, Barbie scene where they're like driving in the mall with the Barbies. I remember the different buzzes in the movie. I remember freaking what's the girl's name? Jessie.
Yeah, Jessie.
And the horse. What was the horse's name?
I can't remember the name of the horse.
Dang it, man! Bullseye. I think it was Bullseye.
I think
Bullseye. And I remember being obsessed with that. And this movie had the super like heartfelt emotional connection that Toy Story gave us, but this one amplified it even more for me as far as like Jessie losing her owner, I guess is what it is. But
that was beautiful.
That was
that whole montage.
I was crying. I think I remember crying in that scene because I was like, this is hardcore, man. This is hardcore. And then I remember Woody turning on the TV and seeing like his past and stuff. And I think there's a song in this movie. It might be "You Got a Friend in Me," but there was another song in this movie that I remember being so heartfelt. And I remember seeing Woody see himself on a TV screen. And that being an emotional moment in the movie as well. This movie went hard for me, man. Yeah. This movie went hard for me.
This is a movie that's all about addressing the past.
Sure.
A past that a lot of people run away from.
Yeah.
But how coming back to your past, coming back to your legacy, your history, and whatnot. How impactful that is to people. And that is definitely what they hit home with, you know, like you said, Jessie, with Woody, with Buzz, that whole Zord sequence. Funny enough, this movie was originally supposed to be straight to video.
Wow.
And they but Disney gave them the money to fully do it. And their whole thing was, if we're gonna do a sequel, we're not gonna do like the cheesy Disney straight to home video shits that they're used to.
Sure.
That's what they were, they're aiming to. And it really wasn't supposed to be like the big attention of the studio. It wasn't supposed to be that. It was supposed to be a little side project. But what Lasseter came up with, and all the creatives that came up with on the script level and storyboard level, they showed that to Disney. They were like, this is too good to not put into a full movie.
Sure.
So they started doing that, putting that together. There's a funny story of like how they had lost all of the data on the film. There was only, except for one like engineer or animator, one of the two, had like a backup on her computer that she had carried around. She had personally carried around in her car because I think she had a baby during that time, so she had to take her computer home to work from there. So like, long story short, she had the only computer that had the backup files for this entire movie on it, and this was like really close to the release date, so they barely saved it that way. So
that's crazy, man. That's crazy. Where does this one rank for you as far as Toy Story? Does it rank at the bottom? Because it ranks near the bottom for everyone else.
This has some really iconic moments, right? Like there are some really iconic moments in this one. I don't know if it was this one or the first one, but that whole thing where like Buzz tries to fly, and then like he's on the stairwell, and I'm pretty sure it's this one. But he's like on the on like at the top of the stairwell, and and the music swells up, and he like puts out his things, and then like he like jumps off and tries to fly, but then
might have been the first one. I think I know what you're talking about.
It might be the first one or second one, but for some reason I always thought it was in the second one. But to me, this movie probably rank in the bottom only because of process elimination.
Sure.
Right? It's like,
not because on quality.
Right. It's because it's like, what happens when the first movie's a 10, the third movie's a 10, and this one's like a 9.5.
And it also introduced the concept of making a toy a villain as well, whereas the first one didn't really have
right.
The Prospector.
Right.
Shout out to the Prospector.
Yeah.
Who's a hater.
Yeah.
Hashtag no more haters.
Hashtag no more haters. Do you want to jump into Toy Story 3 now while we're...
That's a great... No, let's wait. I kind of want to wait because I think Toy Story 3 brought a different field as far as movies. I know there's Monsters, Inc. and Finding Nemo and The Incredibles that follow these. All three incredibly iconic Pixar movies.
Yeah.
Which of those three stands out the most to you?
Well, of course, The Incredibles is a superhero. We just spent the whole first 15, 20 minutes of the show talking about Justice League. So this is, of course, a superhero movie.
A lot of people say it's the best Fantastic Four movie.
Right. Of course it is, because this is a great film that has a superhero family that has a real connection with, and each character's powers is a reflection of their internal struggle. Dash is a kid who wants to be fast, who wants to be ahead and be, sharp thing. This is the kid. He's a boy, and he wants to become a man. He wants to grow up, and that's his whole thing with being fast. Like he's trying to outrun the world and all that stuff. And with Violet being invisible because she feels invisible to people. Elastigirl because she's reaching to try and keep her family together. She's... Dang,
RB3, you're so deep, man.
Yeah, that really is what it's... I know. But
RB3 made all this up, guys. He's the one who created this. He's like, no, I didn't do it, man. It was the filmmakers.
No. But that's just the way I read it.
No, that's absolutely true.
Same thing with Mr. Incredible. Is some man with all his strength, but nothing else to own up for. So it's a really, really great film. But that's not to go without mentioning Finding Nemo and Monsters, Inc. Finding Nemo was the first Pixar movie I saw in theaters.
Wow.
I remember vividly watching that movie.
Got it.
I even remember watching it, like my mom took me and my cousins in Long Beach, back when I was a kid, and it was like right by the Aquarium of the Pacific.
Oh, cool.
So like we didn't go to the aquarium, but like
Sure.
after watching that movie, I've always like, yeah, I didn't go to the aquarium, because just so many beautiful characters in that film. But I think Finding Nemo is a very...
Is that the one that stands out the most to you as far as... Besides Monsters Inc. and besides The Incredibles?
They all stand out. They all stand out to me. Yeah, they're
I'm making you pick RB3. No,
for me, if I had to go with a favorite, it'll probably be The Incredibles. But I think out of those three, what the best one is Finding Nemo.
Okay.
In terms of quality wise.
Got you.
In terms of like having a heartfelt story that's like super, it's a take on the hero's journey, swimming throughout the ocean, and the concurrent storylines with Nemo and his dad Marlin and all that stuff. I enjoy that film a lot, and The Incredibles as well. But
and Monsters
Inc.
became a
great,
classic.
too. Yeah,
Dude. Monsters Inc. is one of those movies that automatically became a classic as soon as it came out.
Deep themes about friendship and loyalty and the idea of scares, and I think Monsters Inc. plays a lot into a later movie we're going to talk about too.
Sure, let's jump into these categories. I'm categorizing just so we can fill the time.
Right. What do you out of those three movies though? What do you say is something that stands out to you?
The one that's a great point. You know what? The one that stands out to me the most, just because again, it's closer to when I'm a kid. Monsters Inc. is one that stands out to me the most because I remember that being such a big movie as far as like people really connected to it as much as they connected to Mike and Sully, the fact that it's all about scary monsters, the fact that it's all about appearance, like it really connected to audiences in a way that was just as much as a Toy Story and as A Bug's Life and as pretty much every other film they've done to that point. So I remember that one being the connection. And then after that we got Cars, Ratatouille, WALL-E, Up, and then obviously we'll leave it there. But Cars is funny because Cars is one that honestly, if I had to pick one that I really don't have like kind of any connection to, besides Brave too, but we haven't gotten to Brave yet, is Cars. Cars is probably the one that at this point in my life, 2006, I'm watching Casino Royale. Really? I'm not watching Cars.
Well, see,
like, you know what I'm saying? Like 2006, I'm like, I'm older now. Right. I'm in high school now, or at least getting to high school, and I'm more interested in like darker movies, and I'm more interested in vampire movies, and that's kind of my phase is me. This is like vampire Andres as far as like 2006 goes. So that's probably why Cars doesn't really have a connection to me, because that's more like I don't want to see that, that's for kids. So I never saw Cars in theaters.
Cars, look, I came out 2006 for me was 9 years old, so Cars was made for just my age, man. And I'm telling you,
9 years old, that's crazy.
I am telling you though,
so young.
This is a movie that the way we see Frozen now, or the way little girls connected to Frozen back then, boys my age, Cars was it. Like that was the quintessential like movie. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like they had the great like Route 66 song in there, and like, they're promoting the hell out of it on Disney Channel. It was just just Cars was just great. But I mean, it's not the greatest of their movies, right? Sure. But I think it does have something that's really powerful and potent to say about coming back home and coming back to the people, connecting back with your culture and your people, and giving something, giving like a Midwest kind of feeling, or a Middle America kind of feeling.
That's a good point.
In a Pixar and an animated movie in general, because we never see that, and even every other Pixar movie is set in like the suburbs or a big city, but this is something that's
such a good point. Wow, that's something that I didn't think of.
But Ratatouille is my most underrated.
Ratatouille, I remember watching that in theaters. I remember watching WALL-E as well. But Ratatouille, man, that one was it was a lot of fun. It's the idea. The idea is so fun, right? Because if you're like a food fan, or if you're like, especially if you're like a European food fan, which is this movie is based off, like in Paris and stuff. Mm-hmm. The idea of like a kitchen, right? And the idea of like cooking, and the idea of like health code violations and cleanliness is so important to a kitchen and to a restaurant, and to the idea of everything being, when you have a meal being so beautiful and perfect and tasteful and wonderful, the idea that this is not just tastes really good, but it comes from a very clean place. And then the antithesis of that idea is a rat, right? It's the most disgusting, filthy, most atrocious animal that most people could think of, besides like a roach, right?
Right.
They're not going to make Roachatouille anytime soon. But that's the idea, right? The rat is so disgusting and so anti what the beauty and pristine and cleanliness of a beautifully done meal presents.
Right.
So taking those two and smashing it together is a genius idea.
Right, and it's, like I talk about cars being something that's about connecting to your culture, and connecting with your identity. Ratatouille is a film about breaking that, breaking the conventions that you're held to. We see that incredible moment where he's like arguing with the other rats in the sewer, and they're like, what are you doing? Why are you trying to be a chef? Da, da, da. And it's like, that's what I love. That's his passion. And the fact that that's put into the forefront here is really nice and sweet, and that's kind of it's kind of what inspires somebody like me who, when I was a kid, like my parents really wanted me to do like engineering and like math and science and all that kind of shit. So, but then like, I wanted to do movies, so it was like this is something that is kind of help push me into being able to stand up and say that this is what I want to do, and this is how I gotta do it, and I don't want to be beholden to the social standards that we're set upon. And I think Ratatouille is a great film at communicating that. And I think just as a film, like filmmaking wise, it's very like kind of avant-garde, kind of going for like the French wave or the French stylistic, perspective.
Sure.
And that makes it feel totally different. I think that's what makes Pixar movies all great. They all have a different distinct feel. Like I said, the Cars had the country feel. The Incredibles had that 1950s, 1960s sci-fi feel to it. And of course, Ratatouille has that very French kind of nice touch to it,
and the music's great too.
Oh, it's incredible. And I think this is probably the most adult Pixar movie you're gonna see in terms of like, in terms of touching on some potent themes. In terms, like we have that whole opening thing where like the lady was trying to shoot the rat through her thing, and then he was like climbing, and then it's like, I don't know, to me that's pretty funny, but it's also kind of adultish.
Sure.
And that moment where he's like crawling through different vents and he sees like people arguing through the little, like, this beautiful little side moments like that
That's
are just
great.
like very, very.
You're right.
Yeah.
WALL-E is another one that I remember watching in theaters, and WALL-E is interesting because it starts out, obviously it's like a sci-fi kind of cautionary tale, but it starts out as like a silent film.
Yes.
Pretty much a silent film, where WALL-E doesn't really communicate. He just kind of grunts and goes, "Rrr, rrr, rrr." So that's pretty much the essence of WALL-E. And that's kind of, I think that's kind of what the trailer sold us on. It didn't really sell us on the fat people being in space kind of
right. And I think that's really where the movie falls apart for me. To me, the first half of WALL-E, my favorite Pixar movie ever.
As far as like the silent film stuff?
Yeah, the roach, all the stuff on Earth.
The boxes.
Yeah. And even when they go up into space with Eve and that whole thing and the environmental stuff there. But so when the humans come in, it's so bad.
Yeah, I don't think it's bad. I just think it does fall apart a little bit. I don't think it's as bad as some people say and how you say, but you're right. It does feel a little bit like a different movie and kind of like, where did this come from? Fat people, Slurpees, what's going on?
Yeah.
And then obviously it's Xenon on the 21st Girl Century. Shout out to Disney Channel Original Movies. Xenon. Watch that movie. That's where WALL-E got their stuff. No, I'm just kidding. That's not where
I do remember Xenon.
Remember Xenon?
Yes.
Remember with the flying station out of space because Earth is it's like the off-world colonies kind of thing.
Right.
That's the first thing I thought of, even though there's like a bunch of different interpretations of that.
Right.
But I thought of Xenon. I was like, yeah, that's like the Xenon shit.
Yeah.
That's my thoughts and how I go into that.
Yeah.
But obviously, Up is probably what people call when they refer to one of their most emotional moments as far as a Pixar film goes, because Up is one where we start to get into what I like to call emotional manipulation. RB3.
Oh, really?
Is Pixar deliberately attacking your emotions and pulling you to feel something, or are they doing it organically? Because Up is the one that kind of does it in a way that you're like, wait a minute, you're making me feel stuff, and you're doing it in a very aggressive way. Do you feel that way as far as Up?
Yeah and no. I think that...
Because that's what a lot of people have as far as criticisms for Pixar films, that they are purposely emotionally manipulating you instead of just telling a cohesive story and having natural emotional connection.
Well, I think Up, the beauty of Up is how organic you're able to connect to the opening scene, because we all relate to that. We all have somebody who we've loved and passed away, even if it's not through elderly or if it's not like, romantic love, it's, family love. We all have somebody who, we miss and adore and have those memories with. So, of course, that's rooted in a lot of reality for a lot of people. But I mean, that's part of the genius of what they do. I mean, they tell these stories that touch home and hit so many, and that's really, you have so much depth just from that opening sequence with that character. You feel like you spent your entire life with this guy.
Do you feel like that opening scene, that first 5 minutes of Up, is a more effective story than the rest of the movie?
I do. I actually don't like Up outside of the opening.
Shots fired.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a bad movie, but it's just like the whole thing with Doug, the dog, and the
Squirrel.
and the squirrels. Yeah, and the whole the peacock. I never really liked it that much. Outside
it
of
doesn't.
that,
I kind of agree with you. It doesn't. Every time people say Up, they're thinking of the first 5 minutes of the movies and not the entire movie. When they're just like, Up's amazing. You mean the first 5 minutes are amazing, or you mean the whole movie is amazing?
Yeah.
Obviously, a lot of people might disagree, but I do feel like the first 5 minutes are so effective to the point that the rest of the movie just becomes kind of fluff.
Yeah, and I think there's a point to, Up and Wall-E. Those are two movies that Wall-E came out pre-Oscar, like changing the Best Picture nominees. But I remember when Wall-E came out, that was a big deal of not getting a Best Picture. There's same thing with The Dark Knight and Wall-E were the two that were like, these are mainstream films that could get Best Picture nominations, just didn't. And then Up was the first film after that, and Up was even like the opening film at the Cannes Film Festival.
Up was a hyped film, that's for sure.
Yeah, opening film at Cannes, and it did, and again, that was the first Pixar movie to be nominated for Best Picture.
Yeah.
So that's, and the second animated movie of all time to get nominated. So it's worth.
Well, it's a beautiful movie. That's for sure.
It is, and technically
it's beautiful.
And I think emotionally they do have a lot of cool stuff. I think this is something that maybe connects more to, maybe not kids or adults as much. Maybe more like maybe elderly people. I don't know. I mean, I'm not really sure, but again, it's a fine movie to me, and it really is another callback. Again, they switch genres, they switch tones all the time. It's a callback to like those 1970s like adventure movies.
Sure.
You know what I mean, with the evil bad guy and the fur coats and the animals and the out in the jungle and the wilderness, all that stuff. So.
And then following that, Toy Story 3, which we obviously mentioned before. Toy Story 3, to me personally, started like this new kind of renaissance period as far as like all these other movies. But Toy Story 3, when it came out, was so hyped.
Right.
Incredibly hyped. And obviously it deals well with regarding the first two movies, right? Because this one came out in 2010, which is miles away from Toy Story 2, which I believe came out in 1999, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So the fact that it's like 11 years after the second one, and like it's even longer than the first one, it connects back to the people who initially watched the first movie as kids, and now watching it as like teenagers or adults. It's crazy how that has that kind of connection towards it, because that's how I felt watching it. It's like, I remember these when I was kids. I had the freaking Buzz Lightyear toy, and then I have that connection towards it in the movie as well.
Right.
So it's a double form of emotional connection.
Right, and they this was really the first animated like trilogy or franchise to address a jump in age between the years. A lot of times, a lot of anime films didn't do that. Particularly something like Shrek, where they're all the same age, or other anime franchises. I mean, when the sequels come out, they're all the same age, or if it's not like a prequel or something. But with Toy Story 3, having that time to develop, again, that's really the mature concept of it. And they wouldn't have came up with the idea. Their whole idea of this movie was just reminiscing on the Toy Story days, like as a company, as a group, and how they're trying to rebuild that kind of energy, that kind of feel, and how's that interpreted. Of course, this happened. This movie was in development for a while, but Disney brought Pixar outright in like 2006.
Sure.
And Disney buying Pixar, there's a level of expectation you have to creating these characters and having these people there, having the same kind of energy feel that was in their original film work and their original work, and how Brie recognizing that is important. And that's what the theme of Toy Story 3 is. Andy looking at his toys, and the toys reminiscing on their past, and how is that going to affect their future,
and how he's moving on for like growing up.
Growing on, exactly, and moving past your past, and
moving past your childhood,
and taking that legacy and putting it to somebody else. Some will even say it's like a meta commentary towards like John Lasseter kind of handing off Pixar to Disney, and him working with Disney now with their new animated wave that they've had. Again, this came out same year as Tangled. Frozen came out a little later, and it had a whole new renaissance at Disney, and that's really responsible for with John Lasseter, you know.
Absolutely.
But you know, it could be kind of seen on a meta level in that way, but on a film level, it's just an incredible movie on its own, right?
Sure.
You get a great villain with the bear. I forget exactly. Is it Lonzo, right? Lazo?
I forget.
Lazo, yeah, but and it's you know. We talked about the first film having a human villain, the second film having a toy villain. This one's kind of both, right? Like the main kind of struggle is going to a preschool and, you know, having to reason with all these like irresponsible kids just like knocking around toys and all that stuff.
Sure.
But then even on a and you know, and that's the way you get kids in too, is still having kids figures, because you don't want Andy still playing with these toys.
Yeah.
But also on another level with you know, with Lonzo or Lazo, I keep saying Lazo, the bear, just like messing with them and
Sure.
trying to you know,
Manipulate them.
yeah,
and stuff.
manipulate them and all that.
It's absolutely an incredible movie for
Great
sure.
film.
And then after this, we get the downfall of Pixar. It's not really a downfall, but it's one of those like we get a turn in Pixar movies that start to feel less like the Oscar-winning type Pixar films that we're used to, or the emotional type of Pixar films that we're used to. And I know shots fired. A bunch of people are gonna get mad.
Toy Story though was nominated for Best Picture. Toy Story.
No,
3.
Toy Story 3. I'm not. I'm not talking about that one. I'm talking about what followed it, which was Cars 2,
Cars 2,
Brave,
yeah.
and Monsters University. 3 films that I kind of don't really have a connection to. Remember, I mentioned it earlier, but I don't really have a connection to these movies. Oops, sorry. RB3, take it away.
I don't have a connection to Cars and Brave at all, really. Monsters Inc. Monsters University. I do have a connection to.
You like that movie?
That came out around the time I was starting to think about college and
right.
heading off to college. So it has a connection on that front, yeah. And that's another example of them taking something from their earlier filmography and adapting it to their new adult audience.
Sure.
Which I think is great. But yeah, this literally came out during a time that I was thinking about college a lot. The other two, I mean, a lot of people argue that these are Toy Story 3, Cars 2, Brave, and Monsters Inc. are them trying to follow like the Disney mode.
Sure.
You know, them being
as far as making sequels and stuff.
Making sequels, and you know, Brave is obviously directly trying to be a Disney princess. Sure. Even to the extent of borrowing a lot of the Disney tropes that we've come familiar with. But I don't know. I don't like Brave. I don't like Cars 2. Monsters U I care a lot about.
Sure.
And I think it does have some really funny moments in that movie.
Sure.
But the next one we're going to talk about is Inside Out, of course.
And Inside Out to me is one of those like that really put Pixar back on track. As far as like everyone was raving about this movie. Go see Inside Out. It's amazing. It's this. It's that. It's gonna make you this. So I did. I went to see this movie by myself when it came out in theaters. And it was great. It's truly a really well told, really well done story. I can't lie. There was points in the movie where I really wanted to just get rid of sadness. She was pissing me off. But then eventually we come back and we realize that, sadness plays a part and she's important in our emotions, right? Where you can't just get rid of it or just shut her up. You have to let her take the wheel for a little bit and then go back to joy, and then go back to other kind of emotions, and then to know when to express those type of emotions. And the fact that it's dealing with like a little girl going through that transitional period in her life is a very well done type of movie.
And you know, to me, Inside Out is as close to a perfect movie as you could get. This was a film that resonated with me emotionally. Really is a nice film because it addresses emotional disorder in a way that is kid-friendly, appropriate, while also being really deep philosophically. You know what I mean? Addressing some of our fears or some of the things that we have in our mind, like forgetting our imaginary friends, or completely disregarding.
What was his name? Bobo?
Yeah.
Boo-boo?
Bill Bill. I think not Bilbo. Something like that.
Bilbo, right?
Might have been the dancing clown or whatever. I don't know what
Pennywise?
it was. Yeah. But no,
I'm sorry, Bilbo, the dancing clown.
Bingbo. Yeah. I think I'm not even sure. Whatever.
I'm pretty sure you mean Pennywise.
They'll correct us.
It's Pennywise.
But the elephant, and that is such a. The reason why they had to hide that from the marketing is because they didn't want kids to see this really great, cute, iconic character and just go out and buy all the toys and see him die halfway through the movie.
That would have been messed up.
Yeah.
That would have been messed up.
Yeah, they had to. But when you watch the movie, that's the beauty of it. When you watch the movie, it's totally unexpected, just like it is presented to the characters in the film.
Sure.
But then you get so connected to that so immediately and so vigorously right from the start that when he does end up like sacrificing himself to save joy and to save sadness, it's one of the most heartbreaking moments you'll ever see in an animated film.
Sure.
And to me, there are three moments in this movie that bring me. When I first saw it in theaters, 3 moments that brought me to tears. It was that scene where he sacrifices himself, the moment where joy and sadness have to come to like the catharsis of like mixing emotions. Is really the way. And then she's about to board that train, and then she comes back home and she just falls in her mother's arms, like in her mother and father's arms, and like after running away. I was like, that.
Yeah.
And even some of the opening stuff of like her moving from San Francisco to like or moving from her old town to a big town like San Francisco is something that resonates with a lot of people who move around a lot, and that's something that was great. And I just think there's so much great in this movie. I know there's that whole, and I kind of want to ask you your thoughts on this. There's that whole notion of, this film has been shown to a lot of kids who are dealing with emotional problems and dealing with, psychological issues and stuff like that.
Sure.
To kind of help them cope with that. But there's a whole argument that this movie shouldn't really be representative of that because it's oversimplifying the idea of emotions, and emotions are a lot more complex than just having 5 happy, colorful characters that are controlling things on it.
Yeah, but I think they dive into that towards the end of the movie as well. They
and
talk
I agree
about
with
the
that.
complexity of emotions and how it can evolve as you grow age. Because you're not really going to show this movie to kids to teach them the over complex essence of emotions. You're just going to be like, hey, sometimes you're angry and sad, but you got to know when to express it the correct and right way and the correct and right time, right? So I think it's fine. I think kids can love this movie as well and can enjoy it for what it is. Let's quickly jump into the last 3, which is current times. Good Dinosaur, Finding Dory, Cars 3. 3 movies that kind of didn't really do what they... I mean, Finding Dory made a lot of money. And I thought it was pretty good.
I love Finding Dory. Other 2 I didn't see, unfortunately. I'm sorry.
There you go, man. Shots fired.
I didn't.
That was our podcast. I'm kidding. But yeah, these 3 movies, money-wise, Finding Dory stands out to me the most. It made a lot of money. It made a pretty big splash as far as everything else goes.
It's the highest grossing Pixar movie, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah,
Finding Dory.
And I thought it was actually good. What do you think of this? Because I thought it was a good sequel.
Well, I think it's good because it further addresses the idea of mental illness and addresses it in a really powerful and potent way. I think that is real. I mean, a lot of people, disagree with the way they address those issues, but I think that's really powerful and impactful to the story they're trying to tell. That being said, of course it has its problems. Of course it turns into like a Looney Tunes kind of deal at the end with them driving cars and whatnot. But I think it's really great, and having the idea of like a prequel/sequel to me worked really efficiently. So I loved it for that.
Good deal. Let's jump into some of your guys' questions. Alexis Lopez says, "What Pixar movie, not necessarily your favorite, did you watch the most as a kid? The only VHS I had was A Bug's Life, but WALL-E is my favorite." Yes, I would. It's a toss-up between Toy Story 2 and A Bug's Life. But I would probably say A Bug's Life is a movie that I watched the most. Like that, I'm telling you, man, that movie, it came out like right at the perfect time where I was like a little kid. And I loved that movie. I love the toys. I love the characters, the jokes. That's probably the movie I saw the most as a kid.
Right. Probably for me, it'd be actually Monsters, Inc. Yeah, because that movie I watched a shit ton when I was a kid. And even like now, I think now I'll probably watch my Inside Out the most, just because to me that's just such a great
Yeah,
movie.
and it's the most relevant
Yeah.
one as for me as well. Evan DeGraff says Ratatouille is the most underrated Pixar film. What do you guys think of that thought?
Completely agree. Completely
You think it's the most
agree.
underrated?
Absolutely, yeah. It's like I said, it's the most adult. It's the most, yeah. It's definitely my favorite.
Pablo says Toy Story trilogy, in my opinion, is the best ever. That's how good Pixar can be. What say you on the impact it has had on animation and cinema?
It's had an incredible impact on us. I think we wouldn't, without Toy Story, we wouldn't see franchises like How to Train Your Dragon, like Shrek. We wouldn't see. I mean, any CGI animated film really owes it to Toy Story.
Yeah.
And in terms,
And there's some great CGI animated films that are not Pixar now.
right,
And that
right,
we can all
right.
enjoy.
And DreamWorks came out of the lab of something that Pixar started. A lot of companies. So I do agree. And just as a franchise wise, it definitely influenced. We back before the Toy Story days, we didn't see animated sequels get theatrical releases.
Sure.
Period.
Yeah.
It just wasn't a thing. But because of Toy Story 2 being so successful, we see now Shrek franchises, Despicable Me franchises, all these different animated franchises.
That are enormous. Speaking
Yeah.
of franchises, Payam Sharafi says Toy Story is the greatest trilogy of all time. The Incredibles is the greatest superhero film of all time. With that said, Ratatouille might be my favorite. Monsters and Nemo deserve a mention too. Yeah, Toy Story is a great trilogy because there's
Yeah.
not really a weak film in that trilogy.
Absolutely not. And, in terms of consistency, you could argue that, the Godfather trilogy falls apart at the end. The Dark Knight trilogy, whatever you think. I love The Dark Knight Rises, but a lot of people don't. But the Toy Story is very consistent with a lot of stuff.
Paul Wolf says, being a special education teacher, Finding Nemo shows us that you are capable of doing anything, even if you have a disability. Prove them wrong every day and just keep swimming. It's my favorite. It's my favorite for that reason, and we call my son that as my wife and kid was pregnant with him. Love you, Dad. Yeah, that's a great movie.
Yeah.
And what do you think of the whole disability aspect of
No,
that?
that's beautiful. I hadn't really thought of the film too much in that respect, but that's, of course, that's a big part of it. Disability is something that impacts a lot of kids, and it's not something that's represented very often in cinema, especially in animated films. So for me, Finding Nemo did that great, and I think Finding Dory did that great as well. So yeah, I love that they're able to address that.
Last question we'll get, or last comment we'll get, is Chester Arizmendi, who says The Incredibles is easily my favorite Pixar flick, best Fantastic Four movie ever made.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. I mean, we haven't really had a good Fantastic Four movie.
No, we haven't. This is the best we're kind of gonna get.
we had a really bad one with Josh Trank. We had two other pretty bad ones with Jessica Alba.
Yeah.
No,
listen,
they were bad.
Those came out
They were bad.
Those came out when I was a kid.
Come
you know
on.
what I mean? I saw those two in theaters.
No.
I think they're not that bad.
They were
Come on.
pretty bad. They were pretty bad.
For what they're trying to go for. Much better than the Josh Trank ones. You got to give me that.
Well, that's because the Josh Trank one is barely a movie. It's barely a movie.
Yeah.
But let's finish up with our...
The Incredibles, though, is one that is
absolutely
wonderful.
Favorite Pixar movie. Ready, set, go.
As one single movie, I'd probably go Inside Out. And if
Favorite?
not, favorite.
Okay, not best, favorite.
Okay, then favorite I go for Incredibles.
Okay. And then best one you
Best
would say?
I would say Inside Out. As an individual film. As a trilogy, Toy Story is the best trilogy.
Got you. Man, it's a tough one for me. It's anywhere between, for me, favorite, I might say Toy Story 2. I might say Toy Story 3. Probably Toy Story 3 is my favorite one, followed closely by 2 and A Bug's Life. I love those movies. I think they're absolutely fascinating. I think what Pixar does is absolutely fascinating, and I think they deliver a lot of great original content and great original movies, and I wish we could see more of that.
Yeah.
I don't know any kind of... I feel like now, as far as what we get in animation, we get a lot of good different types of animated competition, and I think that's important.
Yeah.
As far as it's not just Pixar all the time. I think Disney animation is making some good stuff.
Yeah.
I think we're getting some good animated musicals now. So I'm excited for the future of animation.
Yeah, unfortunately, DreamWorks has kind of fallen off in terms of they had a great run of just nonstop, great films.
Sure.
Whether that be Prince of Egypt, Shrek, How to Train Your Dragon.
Shout out to Prince of Egypt, man. That movie goes hard. I love that movie.
But now it's like they're just kind of putting them. They had a CEO change and they're changing studios for a little bit, so it's a little different now. But I hope nothing but the best for it. This is always good competition, and that's always my argument for somebody who says, "Oh, the Marvel movies are going to be affected by the DC stuff." It's like, no. If you have a reliable brand, if you have a reliable concept, you're always going to have you're always going to have great box office receipts. No matter how bad the DreamWorks movies are going to get, people aren't going to stop seeing Pixar movies because it says Pixar. And people are general audiences are able to recognize that.
There you go, guys. That's the lesson for today. We can all get along and make great movies together.
Yep.
With that being said, that is this episode of the Meaning of Podcast. Make sure you guys like, subscribe, leave your comments because we will be reading them on a constant basis. Next week, we're going to do an questions from you guys. So we're going to be making sure and taking your questions. We love reading your guys' thoughts, your questions, your concerns, your opinions. Whatever it is, we can all be civil, we can all be happy, and we can all disagree and agree in joyous and in harmony. I am Ace.
This is RB3.
And that was the Meaning of Podcast. Make sure you guys tune in next week. And make sure you guys like and subscribe and watch us.